Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're looking at a game that I mentioned a while back in the hopes that Hamster would get the licensing rights to more obscure arcade titles from developer NMK. Somehow it seems like Hamster heard those requests and acquired the rights to release one of their most insane arcade games possibly ever. That is a roaring good time, pulling out all the stops. Today we're checking out Riot, developed by NMK and published by Tecmo, released to arcades in 1992. This would come to the PS4 and Nintendo Switch through the arcade archives in October of 2024, and it is a welcome addition indeed. But before we bang on too much more, let's check out the story. You play as a one-man army against an organization known as the Magic Tigers, capable of bending time and space through sorcery, armed to the teeth, and bent on world domination. While many have tried to conquer the Magic Tigers, none have succeeded. It is up to you to take out the lieutenant and leader of the Magic Tigers and save the world. Gameplay-wise, you've got a 2D run-and-gun gallery shooter hybrid as you shoot your way through 6 stages of what quickly becomes pure chaos. In the vein of games like Cabal, Wild Guns, or Dynamite Duke, it's you against an entire army, and you can run the fade solo or with a friend in local co-op. What makes this different compared to other gallery shooters is that here you can shoot into the background and the foreground with enemies swarming from both perspectives. This gives Riot a rather unique pacing that will have you firing in both directions at all times, including boss encounters. As you move through each stage, enemies will rush you relentlessly, but you've got plenty of weapons in your arsenal like a shotgun, heavy machine gun, flamethrower, and grenade launcher that all pack a punch. You don't have any screen clearing attacks, but your fire rate with most weapons borders on insane, so clearing out full stacks of ops is actually more manageable than you might think. You also have an evasive roll you can use to get out of those tight situations on screen. This will at times give you a couple invincibility frames, but it depends on what part of the game you're in. While you can roll out of most attacks in Riot, by the time you get to the last 2 stages, some attacks just seem unavoidable if you're in its path. You start with a health bar and 2 stocks by default, and you can take damage when hit by bullets or if enemies get too close and strike you, dealing heavy damage as well. You can grab painkillers to regain some health, and occasionally get a 1-up icon for an extra life when they drop. Capsules will drop from items around the board and enemies that will contain power upgrades, and these will drop into the center lane of the map. This game gets bucked with the enemy placement almost immediately, often dropping numerous enemies on the board at once in various formations. As you cut through the ops, you'll battle each lieutenant of the Magic Tigers, and these encounters are just as crazy as the game itself as you transport into another dimension, fighting each major. These encounters will weave in foreground and background elements, with bosses being able to move around the entire screen spectrum. Once you defeat each boss, you'll move closer to the Magic Tiger stronghold. Graphics wise, Riot is an incredibly wild game as it goes through time and space without much in the way of explanation at times. Trying to find development info about this was about as difficult considering there isn't much out there from NMK or Tecmo. From what I could gather, this likely ran on JAMA boards with Tecmo's System 16 hardware that Final Star Force ran on, as it would have released in arcades that same year. Though without anything verifiable, this is merely a guess. Despite this having similar sprite work to the Ninja Gaiden beat 'em up from 1988, the main difference is that you have full spectrum on screen. It's crazy how much of each environment is destructible, with almost everything taking damage on screen. There's so much on screen that can be demolished at a given time, it's actually stunning. Even more so when you move between areas, you'll often crash through neon signs and various backdrops like waterfalls and comically long hillsides. Stages have several layers of scrolling and some sprite scaling when enemies fire rockets at you from the background. The progression of stages goes at breakneck pacing at numerous points. Waves of gunfire projectiles can start hurling your way at any moment. You'll battle through city streets, alleyways, shopping centers, and eventually the cargo bay of a moving plane. Each stage is nicely detailed, several with some Easter eggs like the impaled Robocop in stage 1, letting you know off the rip this is going to be a ride of a game. Enemies have a variety of sprites across the game's 6 stages, and these get pretty wild with the designs from the foot soldiers to the bosses. The Magic Tigers have quite the assortment of henchmen, from the rifle-wielding soldiers to the skydiving battalions you'll fight in midair. While the enemies do repeat after a while, there is typically one more added each stage until you reach the final conflict with the Magic Tiger leader. You even fight a gorilla wearing a vest that hits you with its sprinkler technique if you're unlucky. The enemy variety honestly gets pretty crazy here after a point though. Bosses are possibly the best part of the game, each with a more outlandish arena than the last. Each encounter takes place in an alternate dimension where each lieutenant takes their true form. These battles go one of a few ways, being a main boss that summons majors that surround you, or the boss itself will move about the full spectrum of the screen while having a shield that has open damage phases. The Skydiver boss is honestly a sick encounter, and when the werewolf encounter ends, you see an office full of slain henchmen and wolf pelts. Coming back from the other dimension makes you wonder at times what is really going on as you make your way towards the Magic Tiger's leader. The cutscenes between each stage are short vignettes that are equally awesome and bizarre. As the story gets broken down, the narrative narrative, much like the gameplay, is pretty out there, but also very entertaining. The final cutscene when you watch the Magic Tiger leader decompose is a particularly dark ending, as it's followed by a changing seasons montage of their final resting place. Sound-wise, Riot is pretty sick with its dystopian soundtrack and crunchy in-game audio. Mikio Saito lays down some bangers for the game's 6-stage run, and these have a feel of 90s action-adventure cinema. The tunes have this action set-piece feel that's mixed with bits of horror once you get to the boss encounters and cutscenes. While the main stages are hype, the boss tunes get a little more brooding with stab notes every so often. It's an awesome soundtrack and possibly in the top of NMK soundtracks, though Thunder Dragon 2 and Zeb Blade are still contenders. Sound effects in game are also on the punchier end, with a myriad of audio work from voices of downed enemies and the barrage of gunfire and explosions from all sides of the spectrum. Certain guns will have a more grainy sound to them, but overall the gun audio is pretty buck. There's also a few sound bites some may recognize from previous Tecmo arcade games like the breaking boxes from Ninja Gaiden or explosion audio from their shooters and action games. When you fight the gorilla, it will make you laugh as you roll away from the roaring swipes, and these are genuinely entertaining encounters when they happen. Riot is pure insanity from the minds of the developers at MMK, and this is one of my favorite releases of theirs now. The non-stop action and pure chaos of the plot is just fun to play through, and I wonder how this, much like many of their other releases, never made it out of the arcades before now. The difficulty isn't too bad either, with the main thing being getting used to aiming in front of and behind you, but once you've got that dialed, you're cruising. It's a short game coming in at about a half hour even if you're getting smoked, but even if that's the case, you're having too much fun to notice, or you're seeing something you missed from 5 or 6 clears ago. Riot gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended for fans of gallery shooters and run and gun games, as this is possibly one of the best hybrids I've seen and now got to play. This, along with the rest of the NMK catalog, have been absolute blast to play, and this is among the top of the list. While Zeb Blade was their dream match when they used SNK hardware, this is right up there with it as they teamed up with Tecmo, creating something truly unique. This is available on the arcade archives on the Switch and PlayStation for $8, which is a steal for how much gameplay you're likely to get out of it. If you're into gallery shooters, this is a certified must play. And if you made it this far into the video, I thank you so much for watching. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. Glad you use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.